people need these little advantages, and that's where all these sort of extra 10%ers are really coming through. This is where cryotherapy is coming through. This is where people are starting to manage their blood sugar a bit more. This is where people are using products like CBD, because it's so competitive now and there's so much information out there. And I think the general athlete and the general consumer are much more aware of what's good and how they can improve themselves.
Welcome back to the 101 podcast, where we talk health and wellness with myself, David, and my fellow co-founder, Joe.
Hi there. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Dan O'Neill. Now, Dan is an ex-Olympic trainer, an two-time ultramarathon runner.
Yep.
And Dan, we are so excited to have you here on the podcast today to talk all things wellness. How are you today?
Awesome. Thanks for inviting me down to the Dream Factory.
Well, thanks for...
Serious setup here.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I mean, let's dive straight into it. Dan, it would be great to know a lot more or hear a lot more about you. Obviously, you've got a wide array of skills and experience within the health and wellness industry. Why don't you tell us a bit about that? Yeah,
sure. I mean, I guess my sort of career started in Australia. So I've worked in both in personal training and in professional sport. So I guess it was always my aspiration to be an athlete, and didn't quite have the sort of skill set to quite make it, but I still had such a passion. I think the underlying passion was always just to figure out how to be better and how to improve. So I think I knew what I wanted to do straight away. As soon as I left school, I knew I wanted to work in health and fitness. I knew I wanted to work with athletes. And I quickly went to university and then started working in rugby league. So you guys have got rugby here. We've got another version in Sydney that we play. But that was a dream job for me. That was an absolute dream to be part of helping coach these sort of athletes that I'd watched on TV. And then you sort of I think. At that time, I kind of wanted to continue to grow, so I went and mentored a lot with other health and fitness professionals in Sydney, and then endeavoured to travel. So part of travelling meant that I got the opportunity to go to America and intern with the Florida Gators college basketball team, which was one of the best experiences in a professional sporting team I've sort of ever had. And then things just followed on from there. I made a decision to move to the UK about 6 years ago, and during that time I got to work with the under-18s with Millwall, with their youth club, and then I also spent a stint over in China with their women's Olympic rowing team.
Nice.
And now just to finish, I guess I'm more just in fitness myself now. So I run the head of training at a health and wellness space called Until.
Nice. So you've got quite a good mix there of different sports. I mean, Aussie rugby, I think, is a bit more intense compared to our rugby in its own way. I've seen some of the rules, and it's
they're savage.
It can be quite brutal.
They're savage. They're savage. They're fit. The thing I love about that sport is the level of fitness that goes. I love rugby. I think it's so physically demanding, but the sport of rugby league, the level of fitness required is. There's not too many sports where you have to be that fit. I would say, being a UFC fighter, being a boxer, I don't think there's many other sports that you can play that you have to have a wider range of strength, speed, power, and fitness, and be able to compete at the highest level. So that's why I love it. That's my passion.
Nice. Do you have like a preferred sport you've worked in? Because I guess each requires slight different approach, slight different mindset, slight different discipline to be the best at that sport. Is there like a preference you had in terms of your fitness side?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think in terms of working with rowing, it's very scientific, right? There's almost a bit of a formula that you need to hit. You have to be able to hit certain prerequisites in the gym. You have to be able to hit certain splits on an erg. Both on the water and on the machine as well. So you can almost have an idea where you're going to place before you've even competed, just by simply knowing your numbers. So one is very scientific. If you work with football, it's an emotional experience more than it is with rugby. Where rugby, they want to rip in and they want to work hard, and with football, it's about managing people a little bit more. They want to be fit, but they don't tend to want to work as hard in the gym. So you have to work with personalities more. And with rugby, you have to pull them back. It's the opposite. They want to do too much. You're like, we've got to chill and we've got to manage your energy for the weekend. So they've all got their cool little aspects.
Almost like preserving a rugby player because they might spend too much time in the gym.
Way too much time. You have to cut their sessions because they love to. They're more dopamine driven versus a footballer, right? They've got that intrinsic desire to. They're high risk takers. They're high achievers, right? So they want to push everything to the limit. Naturally, that's that sort of chemical dominance in their brain is that dopamine. So you have to manage them rather than tell them to do more, as opposed to the footballers being a little bit more emotionally driven, where they love to be on the field and they'll play, but they may fake injuries, or they say, oh, training hurts me, I can't do it, but they'll go out and like break a record on a 10 meter sprint. So they've all got their assets, they've all got their strengths and weaknesses.
And Dan, I mean, we'll get into mindsets a little bit later, but with the various different disciplines, I guess, that you've been across, for our audience, could you explain a little bit more what a holistic training schedule is and the importance of that?
So it all starts from like establishing like what are your needs, what are your need requirement for these athletes, right? And generally you've got a bit of we know we need to check in on your energy, your sleep, your stress, your digestion, how's your training and all those things. But each sport might have like a slightly different needs analysis, but the things that never change no matter what sport you're working, they have to get their sleep, they have to get their rest. When you're competing at the highest level, you've got to be getting your 8 hours sleep. There's no debating that. And that needs to be supported as well with good nutrition. And I think the days of having poor nutrition and just turning up and training, I think they're starting to like really fade out. Sport is becoming so professional across the board. And because it's so competitive now, people need these little advantages. And that's where all these sort of extra 10%ers are really coming through. This is where cryotherapy is coming through. This is where people are starting to manage their blood sugar a bit more. This is where people are using products like CBD because it's so competitive now and there's so much information out there. And I think the general athlete and the general consumer are much more aware of what's good and how they can improve themselves.
And I guess, I mean, you've done 2 ultramarathons. Yep. You've also done Australia's Strongest Man. So really, when you talk about holistic training, I guess you're somebody who you have to essentially live and breathe that, right? And I guess for the different times when you are in a position of, let's say you're training for an ultramarathon or you're about to do Australia's Strongest Man, do you find that maybe your nutrition changes? Do you have to essentially adapt the way in which you sleep, the way in which you train, the way in which you eat, or how exactly does that work?
Yeah, and that was a lot easier before. I had a 19-month-old little girl now, and if that lifestyle lends itself very well to being single, because you can be very selfish. There's a lot that goes into being successful in those events, and I find not just physically but emotionally, you're putting so much into what is it that requires me to be better and get the next 10%. So yes, nutrition has to be on point. And sometimes you're sacrificing those things. You're not going out with your mates. You're not having those extra drinks. But you're focusing on eating more, not less. You're really trying to dial in and go, have I eaten enough? Particularly with the strongman events, it was constantly going, I've got to eat again. Man, I've got to throw some more food down. So like I'm much more. Even if you're not hungry. Yeah, even if you're not hungry, right? So no, I'm a bit more. I'm not competing in anything now, so I'm a bit more relaxed with it. But that intensity dial like ramps right up. Food prep is on point, and starting early in the morning. I like a really wholesome breakfast, so I'll be having a protein-rich breakfast. So I might be having eggs or chicken or steak or beef mince or something that's quite hot, like hearty. So I've got the kind of foundational building blocks to start the day straight away.
Nice. I mean, that sounds like a good breakfast.
Breakfast.
I actually don't have a lot of breakfasts because I try and like increase the fasting
Yeah.
throughout the day. Is that something you'd actually recommend within if you're training? Because obviously there's different benefits to that as well.
I am a believer in fasting. I think there's a lot of benefits for anti-aging, and it also provides a relief on the digestive tract where we can have. Sometimes we just need to give it a little bit of a rest, and it will like help detoxify and help clear our body out of the toxins much quicker. So it's got its place. I think if you're talking performance, I always advocate that you need breakfast. I like it because I feel like you feel primed and you feel charged and you feel like you've got the nutrients on board to perform. And I like it also from a blood sugar management point of view, starting the day with like a protein rich and a fat rich sort of breakfast. So I think they're the things that I try to focus on with myself and my clients. And more recently I've started to use a glucose monitor as well. So it's the 24-hour tracker, and it's just given me a bit of an insight into how those things like work with my body, whether I've eaten or whether I've had coffee or if I've had poor sleep as well.
And I think I kind of like the way in which you actually assess your performance and your physical activity to essentially be able to justify and know how to pivot and how to change things, right? Because I guess the quality of lives that we have depends on the quality of questions that we ask, right? And you can't really measure that which you don't track. So it's quite interesting. And on the issue of sleep, I know you mentioned you've got a little girl with another one on the way, so congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
How has that affected your sleep and your eating? And I guess, obviously, it differs when you're trying to train a child to kind of sleep on their own and different sleeping patterns. And how does that affect your training, and how do you pivot around that?
Yeah, so the biggest commodity in our house is time at the moment, and I have to be, and I guess that's the evolution of, we all have evolutions in life of what makes you change and evolve, and this has certainly changed. I guess the way I behave now, I have to be a lot more organised. So if I'm not organised, then that just means that I'm not eating dinner till 9 or 9:30, and then that does impact sleep. I notice that has a massive impact on my sleep, and like I said, I've been measuring that, and I can tell. So having been prepared so I can have dinner and sort of have a little bit longer to wind down certainly impacts that. You just have to roll with the sleep sometimes, and do you know what I've learned is that I would feel tired pre-having a baby, and I'd probably feel sorry for myself. And because it's happened so often, you just have to get over it. And I think when the mindset changed, instead of feeling sorry for yourself, I actually don't feel as tired, because I think I was probably telling myself a story before, where now I've got no choice. So I'd love to get more sleep, of course, but I think we tell ourselves stories and we tell ourselves we're tired, and I think we can change how we feel by the story that we tell ourselves.
So tell us a bit more about that in terms of, I guess that boils down a lot to the mindset that we have and being able to have our minds correct, right? Which sometimes is not always easy. But how do you kind of reframe the stories that you tell yourself on a day-to-day basis? And also, have you had those periods where you've had those down periods where, motivation just hasn't been there and you've had to essentially pull yourself up? One of my biggest inspirations is my partner Rosella, and she is like tenacious. She's a hard worker, and so I think I think the two people that really inspire me is my dad. He's an extremely hard worker, and then more recently Rosella, since we've been together. And my dad was more around the training aspect, but Rosella's helped me help me realize and help manage the smaller things in life. That's helped me, I guess, have a more successful business, because she's helped me manage my emotions and manage my time a lot better. So she's a massive inspiration for those things. But yeah, energy, it's all about for me is to be inspired. I guess I want to be an inspiration for my daughter and my second daughter. So I guess that's where I'm drawing lots of my inspiration from at the moment. That changes and evolves, I think, over time. But that's where my inspiration is at the moment. So shout out to Rosella.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two huge factors. Physical endurance, obviously you need that when you're doing things like ultra marathons and you're powerlifting and things like that. However, mental endurance, that's huge. Like you see a lot of peak performer athletes who often struggle because they're not quite managing their mental state so well. How have you found that been for yourself personally, especially doing like ultra marathons, knowing the hours you have to put into it, knowing your physical state you're actually going to be going into it, leading up to it, could lead to even you thinking a type of way if you even started the race. How have you been able to manage that as have you gone throughout your career?
I think that when I was younger, I used to think it was all about the magic, and then the more you work, the more you realize it's just doing the hard work. And when you know you've done the work, you know you're ready. I think that's where you draw strength from. So you know you've done the hours. I think if you can with the ultra marathon, for example, you would be setting weekly targets, and if you knew you were hitting 80 kilometers a week, and then you build up into your next phase where you're hitting 100 to 120 kilometers a week, you know you've got the runs on the board. You've got enough work in the bank. So I think by knowing what your target is, knowing what your goal is, and then if you're ticking those boxes off, you know you're ready. And I think for me, I always know when I feel fit, I always feel more resilient. I think aerobic fitness plays such a big part in your ability to manage and tolerate stress. So that for me, that's been like a really big learning curve. When if I have a phase of maybe I'm not doing as much, or I'm doing more strength work, or I'm just not focusing on it, I definitely can just see I'm not as emotionally kind of tough or resilient. And I know as soon as I go back to that, I feel that foundation's really there.
Nice. And for any of our listeners who don't really know what the ins and outs of an ultramarathon are, could you just shed a little bit of light for them? Because it's actually quite hard to actually really take on board like the magnitude.
What goes through it.
Yeah.
Like a marathon in itself, but an ultramarathon.
So I guess an ultramarathon it's technically anything that's more than a marathon. The two that I competed in were 100-kilometre events, off-road in undulating terrain. So these were held in Sydney in the Blue Mountains. And these sort of runs will have, there'll be sort of like flat terrain, and then you'll just come across this slow, grueling descent of stairs that take you up a kilometre, and then you'll slowly teeter your way down to the bottom again. And then you'll see this, again, another flat hill that just creeps on you that takes you an hour to just slowly get to the top. So again, this is where things like experience come in. I think the first time I tried to charge up the steps, but you've got to manage yourself over 12, 13, 14 hours, and you become more attuned to go, I probably should just pace this, and then I can gun it when it's flat, or I can gun it when it's downhill. And I guess you start to learn or have a bit more of a strategy about how to manage yourself. But they're brutal because, you're starting in the dark, and then it's cold, and then you start to run in the day, and everything feels really good, and then the sun just starts to slowly come down, and you're going, I've got to get my ass moving to get as far forward as I can before I trip over something in the pitch black. Because when you've got the head torch, your visibility is not amazing. So go hard early was the trick.
There must be so many moments along that race where you're sort of questioning, can I keep going?
I've got the most vivid memory of I hit 35 kilometers and it said 35 down, 65 to go, and I was knackered. Oof. I got, how the hell am I going to get there? And it was all about going, who cares? Just get to the next checkpoint. And then when you get there, you're like, cool, I can get to the next checkpoint. And it's just about, I guess, ticking off those little boxes. Mm-hmm. The hardest bit was the midway, where I was feeling really good, and then my whole family were there waiting for me. So they re-give you fuel and your gels and your liquids. And then they were having a good time. They were having some beers, there was some music, there was a band playing. I don't want to go. I want to stay with you. Guys. Yeah. So that was the hardest point in the whole race. And then I had to put my backpack on, and I think I changed my shoes over, and then off you go. And I'm like, oh God, I could do a beer right now. So
I think that's it. It's creating those smaller goals because when you think of the magnitude of, you still got 2/3 to go. It's like, I just want to stop now. But if you're like, let me just hit the next checkpoint. Suddenly it becomes much more achievable in your mind.
Manageable, yeah.
Yeah, whereas if it's like, suddenly I've got 65 kilometers to go, it's like...
Yeah, and that's where I guess I draw upon just the amount of times that you do longer practice runs, or knowing that you've done X amount of kilometers in a week. You just know your legs are resilient enough to carry you through. You know that you'll get there. It's just how well you get there then. And that's where your confidence comes from.
Mm. Do you pick any of this up from working with like elite athletes yourself across those different sports?
I think I've always just been either fascinated by what is it that makes the best. So I guess I was probably, when I first started my career and didn't have much work, I was just obsessed with reading articles online and how they do it and what did they do and what was their training protocol. And then I realized that I could just be a pest and call people up and say, can I get a coffee, and can I pick your brain? And I've just always tried to go, who's the best at what they do, and then what can I learn from them? Mm. How can I take that and sort of, I guess, use that information? But I definitely had, and I think everyone should at some point have a mentor. My mentor really drove me to push my boundaries and travel, go overseas, learn from other people, and never stop learning.
And I think that's always good as well, when you've got a goal at hand and you're able to kind of draw strength and inspiration from other people. Because sometimes you can feel lost in your own mind and it's quite personal to you at times, but when you're able to take yourself out of it from people who have done it to a degree, or they kind of know what they're talking about, it makes that thing just that little bit more manageable. Mm. So
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then when we look at kind of your holistic training as well and your protocols, obviously you're a user of CBD. Mm-hmm. What's been the benefit for you in terms of your training or your mindset, and how do you kind of incorporate CBD into your day-to-day life?
I think, as we sort of discussed earlier before we started, that London is a beast that we all love, and there's so much energy in London. We've got everything there at your fingertips, but also it's very tiring, very draining. And so to live that full life, to be a father, to try to be an aspiring athlete, and to run a business, I think it's always really helpful to have those things, to have nutrition on point, to have your sleep on point. But things like CBD and magnesium, those sort of things are an essential kind of additive to help control things like anxiety and restlessness and things like that. They're definitely a big support.
Yeah, because when we were discussing beforehand briefly, you actually mentioned around that sort of competition anxiety that can come up. And a lot of our consumers, they use more for day-to-day anxiety, but actually it's a big part for athletes as well, not just on the muscle recovery and the pain management, but actually that anxiety of going into like a big match or a big competition. Is that something you also use it for yourself?
Yeah, I think it's just more, it's more a staple than it is a supercharged sort of additive. I wouldn't say I'd sort of add it in or take it out. I just like to, I'm probably a believer of prevention rather than a cure. And if you can stay on top of all those things, you're going to give yourself the best chance. But if people aren't using it and then sort of suffering or, feeling anxiety, it's a no-brainer that they should be sort of incorporating it.
Yeah. And I mean, you've got a lot going on at home, obviously, with a new baby on the way. Do you have any ultramarathons coming up?
No, not. I think.
Well, what's next?
The next, I've quite enjoyed more recently competing in things like turf games or national fitness games, and there's a pairs called the Fittest in the City. So one of my friends is quite sort of an avid athlete. He sort of tends to be up there, so I think we're going to pair up and try to give that one a go.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued to actually see how you actually train your athletes in itself, Daniel, because I think speaking to yourself, seeing what you've done, working across the various sports, the exposure you've had, the ultra marathons, it hardwires a certain way of thinking.
Yeah.
I think with that as well comes particular habits that people don't necessarily see behind the curtain. So they can obviously see the performance you give on the day and obviously what you're showing with the world, but what you do on a daily basis people don't necessarily get exposure to, and I think that's for anyone who's successful, really.
Yeah.
Is there anything habit-wise that you often incorporate, but maybe you don't necessarily share with your clients or the teams you work with, but actually like this is what actually fundamentally builds that foundation?
There's simple things that I think I take for granted that I really work hard now to implement with my clients, is that routine and structure is so important for success. And if clients come and they do a personal training session on a Tuesday and a Thursday at 7 a.m., why would they go train on a Wednesday and a Friday at 10 a.m.? I like it to be the same time, because the body has these circadian rhythms, and that's not just for sleep, it's for energy, it's for your hunger as well, and digestion. You find that the body has rhythms, so the more regular we provide it with food intake, with training, sleep, wake time, your body will respond really, really well, and then it's really easy to determine what is or isn't working, or if something changes. So routine is such a key thing. Getting food on point, whether that's you food prepping or outsourcing that and using a food prep company, I think that's also a really big game changer, because we're all busy. Everyone's busy now, right? When do you never hear someone say, I'm busy? I'm like, okay, so is everyone, right? It's not new, but what are you doing? Stop telling us, giving yourself a story and giving yourself a get out clause. You just need to create a plan around that. Everyone is capable of getting results in the gym or a marathon or any fitness event, but you just have to audit what you're doing and what can you change. Because I think the reason that people also think they're always busy is because they're so used to filling gaps. Every time you see someone has a gap, they're on their phone and they're scrolling through social media. So there's an input emotionally and physically in the brain that it's tiring them out. Whereas if they just stopped and you guys said that you like to get away once a quarter, right? You like to just be totally still, and it's really revitalizing and really refreshing.
Yeah.
But that works really well on a macro scale, but on a micro scale, I think that needs to be like implemented in life as well. Having no phone, having just a bit of a switch off time where it's just you or your mates or your family.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because I think the amount of information we consume on a daily basis is way more than it was
too much
back in the day. So it's like we're just overloading ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's all about management. What are you actually prioritizing? Like we're all busy, like you say, we're all strapped for time.
Yeah.
But with the time you have, what are you actually focusing on? What are you putting your work towards? What information are you feeding yourself? Because essentially, what you feed yourself is essentially what you're going to be speaking back to other people and will influence your actions. So I think that management aspect is huge.
Yeah, and I think in the world of today, there's just so many things just grabbing for everyone's attention, right? So it's just kind of choosing and filtering kind of what comes to you. So,
but exactly, you can open yourself up to that, or you can choose to prioritize your time and prevent that. And that's a real skill set, and that's hard. And that it helps having someone like audit and overlook your week and go, where am I efficient with my time, or where am I, because you could guarantee 99% of people have pockets in their day where they're not efficient.
Yeah. Whether it's on Netflix or
anything,
on the phone, or
Do you offer advice around that? Do you often go into your client's daily routine or even weekly routine?
So when a client, that's a big point for success is starting down with that initial consultation and getting an idea on where their stress is. So we have to audit energy, sleep, stress, digestion, training overview, like what are they doing, and then what are their goals, and why are you not there already? Like what is it that's stopped you or hasn't helped you? And that's when that audit comes in. Go, what can we do to supercharge that? And that's what I mean by if you don't have the time or you don't have the skill set to cook, outsource it, because you can save so much time by getting a food prep company, tailor your macros, and then send it, and then you can just focus on what you need to do. So it's auditing it and it's setting priorities. That's how we really, I guess, take control of that.
Well, Dan, I guess no doubt there'll be some of our listeners that would want to get in touch with you. Maybe they want to do an ultramarathon or compete in Australia's Strongest Man. Where exactly can they find you?
Yeah, so I guess my best place would be on Instagram, Dan O'Neill, with a little underscore at the end. That's where you find me.
Nice. Do you have a website as well?
Yeah, DanO'NeillCoaching.com as well. Needs a little upgrade, but it's there. It's working. It's working.
Superb. Well, Dan, it's been absolutely incredible having you on today. Thank you so much for coming down. I'm sure our listeners gained something from having you on today, so thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, boys. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Perfect.